Kia ora everyone, welcome back to Under the Whāriki. My name is Anatola.
Kia ora, I'm Tahu.
And today we're going to be talking about homelessness.
With our specialist guest, our bro Aaron. Che bro. Kia ora, no mai, ki Under the Whāriki. So could you tell us a little about yourself, bro?
Yeah, kia ora. Ko Aaron Hendry, toka ingoa. I'm a youth worker and rangatahi advocate, and I specifically support rangatahi that experience homelessness. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Wow, there's lots to unpack, eh?
Yeah, I'm super excited to learn from you and hear about your knowledge and your experiences and the information that we can share with people, but more so just to have a conversation. I think we're super comfy and cozy. So yeah, we're gonna head into kind of like an icebreaker, just kind of warm up the space, warm up people's palates and whatnot. So we're gonna do a little icebreaker called yeah, nah, nah, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say a statement. Tahu and I like to disagree on many things, so let's see what his answer is going to be this time. So I'm going to say a statement, and then we're going to have a little conversation about it, whether it's yeah, nah for you or nah, yeah.
All right.
So, watching a movie / TV show with the subtitles turned on, do you feel like it's a yeah, nah or a nah, yeah? Do you like the subtitles?
Is it like an English-speaking movie or?
I
Like
guess
English.
Oh, it's
yeah.
an English
Because obviously
movie.
if it's Chinese, then it's obviously
yeah.
subtitles.
I'm assuming it would be like anything that would need subtitles.
Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming it would be.
Nah, just a straight
Just
up English
straight-
movie.
oh,
You're
okay.
watching Avengers.
Oh, okay.
And you got the subtitles on.
I was thinking
Yeah.
K-dramas. Right, okay, cool. Got you. Yeah.
Nah.
Nah, you're not like subtitles?
Yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah.
Tell?
I don't mind them. I'm a nah, yeah. I don't really mind. I like the visuals. Also, sometimes I think like you can't really catch everything they're saying. So I love to read. So I love like reading all the little details what they're saying. So
Cool.
I'm a nah, yeah.
Nice.
Oh no, come on then, Tahu.
Surprisingly,
Oh, yeah?
I agree. Nah, yeah. But only because I have a self-diagnosed hearing impairment.
All right. Self-diagnosed.
Yeah, I choose when I can hear things. No, I actually can't hear that well.
Right.
Yeah.
So reading that's helpful.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm always telling Che to turn it up, and then she'll be like, you can hear it. And I'm like, I promise I can't hear it. And she's, anyway, that's a whole nother story. Because then it comes to do the dishes. I can't hear you.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
Sorry, what? Go for a sleep?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Roger that.
I love it.
All right, so yeah, following up from our icebreaker, we're going to go straight into pop quiz with you.
Sweet.
And you have a few questions
I do.
written for us. And it's a game where he'll give us the question, we'll put on the answer.
Yep.
I'll put on the answer. And then,
Cut it out.
then she'll give you an opinion. Then
Yeah, we have a little corridor about it too.
yeah. Okay, so what's
All
our
right,
first question?
you ready?
All right,
Got it. We
whiteboard,
got
whiteboard.
it.
Ready?
We got these beautiful whiteboards.
okay.
Okay, we just had lunch. I
Don't
can't
look at
even
my
bend over
answers,
and pick it
Tahu.
up. All right.
All right. Number
Oh,
one. What proportion of the population live in overcrowded whāri?
Oh.
We're looking for a percentage, right?
What
Okay.
percentage? Yeah.
Oh, like one in how many sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Appreciate
one
it.
and how many? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. It's like last time I'm like, is this too little, too much? We're gonna learn. Okay, you go first, Tahu.
1 in 3 whānau?
I said 1 and 4.
Wow. 1 in 9.
Oh, we were assuming.
1 in
We're
9.
so far off.
Oh, so you're way more far off.
No, but 1 in 9, that's still a lot.
Dang,
Yeah.
that's
But
still
I
a
thought
lot.
the question, you
Yeah.
threw me off with the... Yeah.
And, a real interesting thing is, under our definition of homelessness in Aotearoa, overcrowded, unstable housing classifies as experiencing
As-
homelessness. Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
So, yeah.
Right.
Where is it most common, do you think? Do you know?
In terms of overcrowding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know in terms of, I know we have a lot in Tamaki,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wouldn't know if it's more common here or less common out in the regions. Yeah.
Does overcrowded count as like, if there's 4 bedroom, there should only be 5 people at the house?
Yeah,
How does
yeah, I
it
think
define?
Yeah,
Overcrowded.
I wouldn't be able to give you a strict definition, but when we're seeing overcrowded housing, it's often that you've got whānau that are living on the floor or sleeping on the couch, and
Right.
there's just not enough space.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the driving factors for youth homelessness. Often we see, and again, not often expected, is that sometimes our rangatahi, once they become teenagers, they recognise that it's becoming really hard to keep housed as a whānau, and some of those older teenagers make impossible decisions, to leave home to be able to support their whānau to stay where they are. Yeah, really heartbreaking stuff.
That is so
Massive.
hard. I feel like, as a Pasifika person, I feel like, in my experience as a Pasifika person, I feel like we live in villages, and that still even translates away from our motherland. So it's so normal to have your nana and your auntie and your uncle and your cousins living with you. And I think like sometimes when I'm having conversations with my family, they get quite defensive about the homeless factor and the overcrowding, because for them it's like so natural for them and they prefer it that way. But there is, it's a lifestyle thing, and I think that's why it's like sometimes really hard for people to talk about that, because some people prefer that, but then also there is real issues when it comes to overcrowding and safety and health and all of that stuff. So yeah.
And part of that goes into how we're designing whāri, right? That we're actually not designing it with our larger whānau in mind, and so then we create that problem.
Yeah.
And then there's also a challenge there around sort of landlords and their expectations, and sometimes we see homelessness coming about because you've got a whānau that have been living, maybe their house is overcrowded, but they're making it work, and it's working for them, but then the landlord's like, well, actually, I don't want this to happen, I'll either evict you or you need to move people on, and that becomes really hard for whānau to deal with.
And it's also so expensive.
Right.
The larger house you need, the more
Exactly.
zeros are going to be attached to that price tag.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Cool. You ready for the second one?
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right. What percentage of the homeless population are under 25?
Whoa.
This is a great guessing game.
What percentage?
What percentage?
Under 25.
5. Dang it.
9%.
The other way, we're 48%.
48%.
48%.
Wow.
25 people.
Yeah,
Because-
wow. Yeah, nice.
Sorry.
Explain
No,
your
you-
reasoning. No.
My reasoning is because I feel like a lot of families and like my experience with the care system, I know a lot of our kids experience that when they come out of care, and we have so much issues around care and protection. So that was my reasoning to go a little bit higher. But I don't know if I'm
4%.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit higher.
A little bit higher.
Well, it seems like you got some insider knowledge because around 50%.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's 50%
Yes.
of under 25 people.
That's right. So yeah, pretty shocking. That
I was
actually.
hoping I was wrong.
Yeah, pretty shocking that actually, even in light of that, there is less support for you if you're a young person that experiences homelessness than if you're an adult.
So 50% of people under 25 are homeless?
That's right. Who are part of the homeless population.
Oh, part
so,
of the homeless.
when we look at all of our whānau that are experiencing homelessness in Aotearoa, about 50% of those are rangatahi, so under 25.
Man.
Yeah.
It's shocking because you can hear the stories, but when you put it into numbers, just like it's wild.
I didn't hear the question right.
Tahu, don't make it
I'm sitting here thinking, out of a 25-year-old and under, of the homeless population is under 25.
It would be better if it was more.
Hey,
It's like
4%,
dreaming.
man, like, let's dream. Let's
Yeah, I love this
I'm
number
going for
for
0,
us.
but 4%'s a good, let's work on that.
Yeah, that was a hopeful response.
Yeah.
But
I
you're
love it.
wrong, sorry.
Very wrong. Wow, but still, out of the whole homeless population, for it to be so young,
So young.
that's half of the population is under 25.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
And they have less resources, you're saying?
That's it. Yeah. Specifically our rangatahi that are independent, so they're not living with their whānau because for whatever reason it's not safe to do so, or their whānau are in a difficult situation and can't care for them at the moment. Like, there's a lack of resources for them, definitely.
Just felt that. I'm like, it's such a hard thing it's such a confronting realization. And a painful one, It's like, it sucks so badly.
It does.
Yeah. Anyway, next question.
Yeah.
This is a sad problem.
I know. Grab yourself a cup of tea. Hot chocolate.
Yeah, but it is good to know these things.
Yeah.
I need my weighted blanket.
Okay.
So, question 3. He's ready. Approximately how many people in Auckland are experiencing homelessness?
How many people in Auckland?
A million people in Auckland, eh?
A million?
Break that down by 9%.
We need a percentage though, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
About a number.
No?
We're looking for a number.
Oh, a number of
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
shoot. Okay.
With the percentage.
Yeah, I'm just safe bet.
Right now.
Okay, there's a million people.
Mm.
Dang.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Hold up. Oh, no. Okay, I'm just going to go. You go first.
I've gone with 77,000.
Wow. Yep.
Oh, no.
That's so much.
I've got more. I've got more.
Oh,
I went 120.
that'll be so far off.
Whoa.
We're not laughing because it's funny.
Yeah, but
it's
it's just-
just.
No,
Terrible
well, look,
prediction.
you're very pessimistic, but we're a bit more optimistic news. 18,000.
Oh.
18,000?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
Oh, that's
Well,
really
no,
good.
That's really good.
Well, in comparison to what you got there, I
it is
mean,
better.
way to make a really depressing
I
number
was
look good.
I was thinking a million people, and because of anyway,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, you know, and in
And
saying,
that's still a lot of
and saying
people.
that like the number is like it's hard to get these numbers, you know, because like our whānau who are experiencing this, like they're not
Yeah.
necessarily easy to track down, and so
Changes daily.
so yeah, that's an approximate number. You know, it could be higher, it could be lower.
Still
Probably
18,000 people. A lot
That's
of people
too
to work
much.
before, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And find housing for.
Yeah.
Oi. That's still a lot of people, but 120 and 7,000 is a different ball game.
Yeah. So how much in New Zealand do you know an approximate population of the homeless?
Sorry, no, I don't know sort of nationally. I wouldn't be able to give you a figure on that.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah,
Auckland's
but
18,000.
Auckland's obviously like one of our bigger hubs.
Yeah.
There are a lot of our whānau come into the city to sort of try to seek support. So yeah, that's one of the places where we're experiencing a lot of that pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems really low.
You got it. Nice.
41,000.
In the whole of
41,000.
New Zealand. Wow. Do you think that's not as big as the problem that there is right now?
You mean do I think it's bigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, likely because stigma around homelessness, understanding that sometimes what you're experiencing is homelessness. I think there's probably a lot of underreporting. It's also a hard community to, I guess, collect data on.
Yeah.
You know, not always as connected as, you know, a lot of other whānau. So yeah, I think it would be high. Specifically when we talk about our rangatahi population, I
Yeah.
believe that's higher than what's reported. Often our young people don't actually imagine themselves to be homeless, right? It's not the language they use. It's actually just their life. You know,
Yeah.
the most heartbreaking things that I hear from our young people when I ask them, you know, how long have you experienced homelessness? Often they're like, oh, what is that? You know, you have to explain it, and they're like, you know, unsafe, unstable housing.
Staying
and
at
they're
auntie's house and
that's-
staying at
Yeah.
the bros for the night.
that's been my life. Like I've never
Right.
had a home, you know. So yeah, I think those numbers are probably going to be higher.
Yeah. Wow. I'm a little bit like, whoa, digesting all of that information. It's a little bit, yeah. Wow. Any more questions?
Yeah, we got one more.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Can we get one right, please?
Please.
Of those living without shelter in Tamaki, what ethnicity made up the highest proportion?
Māori. Oh, sorry. that's
No,
right
I
down
was
there.
going to say Māori too.
Yeah, you're right. 43.1%.
Whoa.
What a depressing question to get right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
Sorry,
wanna
I'm
get
just going to
one
say
right.
it. I know, this is not the one I wanted to get right. And
It's
why do you
heartbreaking.
think that is? Why do you think that is?
I mean, there's a range of reasons. I think, you know, one of the real clear reasons is it has history in colonization. You know,
Yeah.
we've got generational poverty.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the most heartbreaking stories that I've heard far too often is whānau that have been homeless for generations, right, houseless for generations, you know. And, you know, specifically when we look at our young people, as I said before, we get to this situation where mum and dad and Pepe and, you know, brothers and sisters have been bouncing around from house to house trying to find a place to go. And you get to this point where it's really hard to find someone that's going to, you know, allow you to stay or has the space. And then our teenagers make these difficult decisions to say, well, I'm going to leave my whānau and go it alone. So that, you know, the rest of my whānau can have a place to stay. And it's, teenagers should never have to make decisions like that.
No, those are not decisions that you want anyone making.
No.
Yeah. And what a heavy burden to carry for these young people, which then obviously connects to so many other issues.
Yeah.
You know, if we think about mental health and,
Oh,
you know, trying to communicate your needs and due to shame and pride and whatnot, like all those things contribute into so many more issues, which possibly escalates when they get older, right?
Yeah.
Which is so...
And we've got so many barriers for our young people to even get help when they're experiencing homelessness, and one of them's that stigma, right? You know, I talked to a couple of young people once who you know, they had been experiencing homelessness. We managed to support them into some housing, and then you know, they got work, and you know, they were doing well. They come off the benefit, they were feeling great, and then something went wrong, and they had to leave their job. And instead of going back to MSD to try to seek support, they decided, look, well, they kind of avoided it, and it took ages, and their landlord almost evicted them, and then we got involved. And I remember calling them home and saying, like, why didn't you just go get your benefit reinstated? Like, why didn't, because, you know, you didn't need to get to this point. And they shared with me, they're like, man, we didn't want to go because we didn't want to be like those sort of Māori. Right? Because like for them, walking into that space, they thought, man, I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be, you know, everyone's going to think like I'm just here to like collect the dole and that's it. You know, they're going to look at me as if I don't deserve this, as if I've done this to myself. And so there's so much shame and stigma accessing this service that is meant to be there to care, love and support them. And so, you know, when you think about, you know, if they hadn't had other supports around them, then they would have been evicted and they would have gone back into another experience of homelessness. We see this so often. Our young people are so afraid to ask for support from systems that are designed to be there for them, that they'd rather sleep on the street than ask for support because of their experiences have been so traumatic.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I feel like a lot of the time they would be so scared because of how media portray these issues and these communities. And so when you're seeing all of that, you know, propagated through our lenses on telephones and on laptops and iPads and TV, it's like all of that kind of gets filtered in, and it creates like another barrier for people to access things, which is just and a common like experience for young people walking into like say MSD seeking support is to get this thrown back in your face to say, oh, look, you have, you know, you're responsible for your experience of homelessness. You know, you've obviously done something that has left you here, so like go back to mum and dad and sort it out. And like, that's not always the case. And again, that's built off stereotypes and discrimination rather than actually listening to that young person, understanding what's going on in their lives. Quick judgments are made just based on their appearance.
It's just bullshit, eh?
It is. Yeah.
The Māori, especially because they're such a communal living people, to know that we're the ones in our whenua that can't even find our whare.
Yeah, it's horrific. Another one of those driving factors for our young Māori rangatahi, and I guess it's across the board, but we know that, you know, our young Māori are often uplifted, you know, at a higher rate, right? Into care systems, and so we see a lot of young people who as children were taken into care because of, you know, just the complex trauma and harm they've experienced. They've never been able to have a stable placement, and so they've kind of been moved around like majority of their lives, and then they become teenagers and they never had somewhere to call home, and then they go into this longer term experience of homelessness when the state sort of steps away. So that's another like real key like pipeline into homelessness for our young rangatahi. And
like the transiency of all of that. And so when you don't have a home, you're also not going to find that connection to a place. So it's like contributes to so, as we said before, so many other things. And it's like, it's, as you said, like Māori are so communal. And so like how isolating that would be. And I think like when we think about mental health, I feel like often people are like, oh, that person has depression or that person has anxiety. But I feel like what I've noticed is like there's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness when it escalates to a really dangerous experience of mental health, which we all have mental health, but
Yeah.
it's more so when it gets to the really dangerous levels. And I feel like that helplessness and hopelessness and isolation would be so high when it comes to people who live as homelessness. And it's really overwhelming to learn about and talk about, but I can't even imagine what it would feel like for someone who actually lives this reality.
Yeah.
They must be so sick of being talked about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They must be so sick of it being used in all political years and research and whatnot.
Yeah, and not actually acknowledging the reality of what our rangatahi are going through. We're having this big conversation at the moment around youth crime, and there's this huge narrative around who those young people are. But I know young people have been involved in sort of ram raids and have been in that situation, and I also know the reality is that they've been experiencing homelessness and they haven't had safe places to live, and they haven't had people around them that actually cared enough to actually say, look, how do we look after you? How do we keep you safe? And we've got government systems that are putting young people back into experiences of homelessness rather than caring for them. Yeah. And so there's, why do we wonder that our young people don't feel like they owe anything to society? As a collective, we've failed them. As a collective, we've allowed them to, and in the worst cases, sleep on our streets. Basically said, look, stuff you, we don't care. And so there's a real hopelessness within some of our youth communities.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That was such a powerful moment that you just shared, yeah, for sure. Are you feeling it? I'm like...
Makes you dizzy, I feel my core warming up and getting angry. And it's sad because I don't do enough at all. Pretty much nothing to help the cause. I'm happy in my house, my kai in my cupboard. This isn't often a subject I actually think about, because even within our whānau, we've got enough resources between us that any of our whānau struggling comes to 8 hours, how long as you need, all those type of things. So I haven't actually had to face it front on, but hearing all these stats and what the reality actually is, that's happening right under our noses, it's shameful to us, to me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think back when I went to New York for the first time when I was 16, and I went on a business trip with 14 other students, which I'm so grateful and lucky that I got to do that. My parents, worked really hard to get me there. And I remember going and really romanticizing Aotearoa. We're so different to America. Oh my God, every corner I was, confronted with the realities of the homelessness there as a young girl that lived a very privileged life. And I was like, oh my God, we don't have that in Aotearoa. We don't have these issues. And I remember coming back home and just being confronted in a really intense way. And my rose petal glasses were completely taken off my eyes. And I was like, wow, we've got these issues. Do you find that a lot of people romanticize that stuff, the issues in Aotearoa, in the sense where we don't experience it, or they compare us to other places? So what would you think are the misconceptions when it comes to homelessness in Aotearoa?
Yeah, I think we're starting to get a bit more awareness around homelessness, around youth homelessness. There's still a huge disbelief. I have this conversation with people and they're like, nah, that's not reality. There's no way that there's nowhere that a young person could go, And the reality is right now, if you're 16, you experience homelessness, there is absolutely no guarantee that tonight you're going to find somewhere to stay. You're going to need to find the right advocacy, you're going to need to find the right support. And actually a year and a bit ago, most hotels, emergency accommodation wouldn't take you. Right. And so, we had that experience a while back. 2020, right, the lockdowns. You remember the reports that were, hey, New Zealand had ended homelessness. Right. We were putting our adult whānau into hotels, and yet we had 16, 17-year-olds that were being denied support, and were not getting into those hotels. And instead, I connected with quite a few after the initial lockdowns ended, who said that they'd slept under bridges, they'd slept in graveyards. They had been sleeping in really unsafe, overcrowded environments where they were being exploited and abused just to keep a roof over their heads. This was their reality. We hadn't ended homelessness for our young people. And we've still got such a long way to go. And when you share this, a lot of people, they don't believe it. How could this be possible in this just, inclusive Aotearoa New Zealand, which we have, right? Surely our government has a place for these young people. Surely we've done enough. And there's amazing work being done in the community, yes, but there's definitely not enough.
It's sad because my flatmate, he's a youth worker as well. And he only works with troubled youth who have gone through the YJ system, and like it's only then they pick them up to put them in housing and stuff. So I'm just wondering now, you know, do they have to be homeless and then commit a crime before?
And even then it's
truth?
limited, right? Even then it's so limited the amount of housing that we have for rangatahi in that situation. You know, again, like August 21 lockdown, like I had a young man who'd gone before the court. Judge was like, yeah, we don't want to put you in prison, like we want to bail you, but his home was just not a safe environment, you know. He went back there, he was going to continue getting into the trouble he was getting into, but also he wasn't safe himself. There was nowhere for him to go. He got put in a hotel. That in itself wasn't a safe environment for him either, you know. And so like he was exited from the court into homelessness. And so like you're talking about sort of drivers of homelessness for our rangatahi, the justice system is another. It's a pipeline straight into homelessness for young people. Again, we haven't done enough to set up the infrastructure to support our young people to ensure that we actually have the services and supports there for them when they need it.
What would a safe infrastructure like that look like? Because I know what you mean about like how they go to the hotels. There's a street on in Hams where all those motels are booked out to social housing. And all of them are filled with gang members and whatnot, and it's not a safe environment for any little 16-year-old going to. What does that look like for the youth?
Yeah, look, I think it's about designing like specific supported accommodation environments for rangatahi that fits their needs, and there are some of these services that are developing. You know, in Tamaki we have several, which is really great, but again, those services are overwhelmed. You know, I think long term, in terms of something we need to look at doing, is actually legislate to ensure that government agencies are providing the right supports and cannot exit a young person out of homelessness. So, you know, if the justice system says, hey, you're going to have X amount of young people coming through your system this year, they need to have actually funded and supported accommodation facilities so that young people have housing when they exit the system and can get the support they need, rather than being exited into unstable and unsafe accommodation.
Which is so widespread across Aotearoa, but if we're focusing on Tamaki Makaurau, is very much like, it's very apparent.
Yeah, and one of the heartbreaking things is Tamaki probably has the most services, yet all those services, again, are overwhelmed, turning people away daily. And it's, you know, and then you go to the regions, there's a lot less. And so, there's huge gaps across the country around services for rangatahi.
Because I found when I was a social worker that I struggled a lot with building trust. In a sense, it wasn't a struggle to get the trust. It was more so that when they would first see me, they'd be like, you're a social worker. They would associate me to SIFs. And trying to build a relationship with people who have been so violently mistreated by a system that would rather take than to give space. I found that to be really heartbreaking, was trying to build trust with people that it was a deep burden to kind of be responsible for all the misfortunes of social workers before me, and try to really create this safe environment for these young people and their families to trust that I was there to support them and work with them. I'm not here to be above you or below you. I'm here to work with you, and that can be really hard. Have you found that building trust with young people that have been burnt so much, has that been a big struggle for you in your work?
Yeah, look, I often say that, you know, we've got to recognise as professionals, specifically, you know, as a youth worker, that I stand in the space of every adult that has harmed you, you know, every professional that has let you down. And then actually as a professional in this space, it's not an entitlement for me to get to work with you. It's a privilege, you know, and I've got to earn the right to be trusted by you. I've got to earn the right to serve you. And that means that, you know, may have to go above and beyond, you know, like I think about young people that I've served over the years, and, you know, they haven't trusted straight away. And sometimes the reality has been, you know, and you support them to get into housing, and then they go back to the street, and like, what's that about? And it's really easy to think, oh, you know, get hoha and think, oh, you just don't care, you know. But the reality is, when we understand that actually those young people have been traumatized, there's a reason why they don't trust us. There's a reason why they're going back to what they know, because hey, maybe they feel safer on the street because at least they know the game they're playing. You know, at least they know the people around them. They know the ways to keep themselves in that safe in that environment. That actually sometimes it's about going out to those streets, finding them, building the trust, continuing to reach out, never giving up. And that's where I've seen the most success in healing, is that when we actually, you know, I talk a lot about, I guess, in this mahi is really important, is solidarity. You know, that actually we don't see ourselves as someone who's, you know, giving a hand up, but actually coming alongside our rangatahi, embracing the messiness of their lives, right?
Yeah.
Standing so close to them that the muck of their reality gets on us, gets on our own shoes, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important aspect to bring into the work. Yeah.
And I feel like whenever I hear people talk about homelessness in the sense where it's like, well, they're just getting, drunk and they're just taking drugs and, and I always think about, well, when I'm struggling, I also turn to really negative vices as well because it gives me instant pleasure. Yeah, it gives me something that I feel like is going to solve my problem then and there, or it's going to make me forget. Yeah. And when I'm feeling hurt, I'm going to try to forget it right then and there. And I feel like there's just such a lack of compassion, for people that experience homelessness or just experience something that's different to us. Yeah. How do you educate people that don't know much, but how do you word it in a way where they can understand that that's a human? Like, obviously you can't teach empathy, but are there ways that you have found have been helpful in trying to have those conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I think focusing on some real life stories around, the reality for people. Again, I think we have some really unhelpful narratives around addiction in our country. I view addiction often, very much through a health lens. And as you said, like, we all have things that we use to cope with the reality of our lives, I drink way too much coffee, right? That's my thing, But, often with every young person that I've served who's experienced homelessness and then is using, some form of substance to help them survive and cope with that, often there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
The reason might be the reality that they're on the street tonight and they've got huge trauma and they actually don't have any support to deal with it,
Totally.
or they've got this undiagnosed mental health or disability, that they haven't actually got the support for. One of the stories that sort of really taught me this, when I first started getting into this mahi, I was actually in between jobs. I was busking on Queen Street to try to get by, and I met this young man. And at the time, like, I had a real, like, I guess, negative idea around homelessness. I thought, that idealized Aotearoa, right? Like, if you were homeless, it was because you wanted to be, right? That was it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I started to meet all the whānau on the street and hearing their stories. And one of the first young men that actually shared with me his story told me about how, look, he'd moved down to Tamaki to stay with his girlfriend. They'd broken up. She had destroyed all of his documentation. His family disowned him. So he couldn't get a bank account. Like, he couldn't apply for a benefit.
Yeah.
He couldn't get a job. He was living on the street. He was working really hard to try to get a job. Like, he'd go into the library and he'd try to apply for jobs. He'd beg to try to get a phone. He'd get the phone stolen. Like, it was just this cycle and he couldn't get out of it, right? And he said, like, I really tried not to use drugs for the longest period of time. Like, I really tried. I didn't want to be that, But it's winter and it's freezing cold, and sometimes I take crack or I take this or whatever it was, to just not feel. It helps me get through the night. I was like, wow, like, how do you judge that guy?
How can you? How could you?
Like, go home to your safe, warm, comfortable bed, put on the heating, and like, judge him for maybe finding a way to survive his night. I think it's really important that we recognize why people are doing the things that they're doing and not judge them for that, but actually look at what is the real problem. The problem actually isn't the addiction. The problem is the reality that this kid doesn't have somewhere safe to live. And let's deal with that,
That's so true.
The rest of the stuff will happen. It's all about healing, Provide someone with a safe, warm environment with the support around them. The healing will happen. Get so focused on, like, before I help you, you need to stop using X, Y, and Z. Like, that doesn't get us anywhere.
The ethics, eh?
That's right.
Because the ethics can change, like that scenario. Like, if, for me, we're at home, I'm fed, I'm not worried about Kai, I'm sheltered, I'm not worried about my home. And then now I get the chance, I've got money in the bank, I've got a house, and I've got Kai, and now I get to worry about my mental health, hey, and why I'm not happy, what's going on here. But they've got none of those three, and this one as well, and just to cope with one of them, like that, I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm over it. Who are we to say that that's not, there's a right or wrong, eh? There's no right or wrong in that situation, and the way that they're coping with it, it's just ka aroha. Like, there's no right or wrong to me. It's just sad. And how do we help? Eh?
Yeah, how do we provide more space for people that are struggling? And I think that's, like, when we look at this too, I feel like a lot of people distance themselves, and it's like that saying, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like, the less you know, the more bliss you
It was
live.
blissful before
Oh,
this
yeah.
conversation.
Right? And it's like, you know, the
Yeah.
less you know, it's like whenever I meet with some of my girlfriends who just like don't live in this world, in the sense where like they're not in a quote unquote helping profession. And it's great to talk about like very like, I guess you could say surface level things, because that's like easier to talk about, to giggle and laugh about.
Easily digestible.
Yeah, you can digest them quite easy over some cocktails and dinner. But when you're sitting and you're having these real conversations with someone who's had to work and advocate for people for so long, you sit with a type of sadness where you're like, you start feeling like questioning yourself, like, have I done enough? You feel guilty about what you have. And that's also not helpful.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of us don't want to have that feeling, because then it becomes too real. And I think we live in a generation where we just want to have things so quick and fast, and we kind of push things to the side. And I think that's why I love this space. It's like Under the Whāriki. It's like, how do we bring things to the surface? Because the more you make something visible, right, the more we talk about it, then maybe we can start finding solutions for it. And when we're saying solutions, like, what do you think are the solutions when it comes to homelessness, which I think is it's a long, extensive time frame for us to ever get to that point. But what do you think is working right now?
Yeah, and I think that first point around like just having more kōrero around this stuff is really important. Like, for a long time, youth homelessness has just been this reality that just wasn't named, you know. Youth workers up and down the country could have told you, said like, what are the biggest challenges you're facing? And most youth workers would say, yeah, housing insecurity, homelessness, like it's a big issue. And yet we haven't really done enough about that. And so then when the government has gone to create a response to homelessness, young people have just kind of been neglected because their voice wasn't at the table. It wasn't a high enough priority. And so like part of like building change and creating change is kind of raising the public awareness to a point where it's like, actually, this is totally unacceptable. Like us in Aotearoa, we don't want to have a society or a country where actually our young people are living on our streets. We demand something happen about this. And when we get to that level, then the government's going to move on that and move rapidly. And so that's one real important part of the change process, is just having conversations with people and starting to raise awareness to that. In terms of solutions, yeah, it's a big thing, right? And there are so many gaps within our whole society where our young people fall through those cracks and end up in an experience of homelessness. I'm part of an amazing collective called Manaaki Rangatai, and Manaaki Rangatai is sort of, a coalition, I guess, of like community, government, advocates who are really working to address and end homelessness, youth homelessness specifically in Aotearoa. And one of the things we've been collectively calling for is a strategy to prevent youth homelessness. So like actually looking at those pipelines, looking at those like main drivers around youth homelessness, and getting an actual strategic plan around how we're going to end that and close those gaps. Because long term, we want to see a world where youth homelessness just doesn't exist. And I know we can achieve that. It's totally possible. We just need to be a lot more strategic around what we're doing at the moment. And another one of those, objectives is legislation, right? So legislation that would prevent government organisations from exiting young people from their care into an experience of homelessness. And the idea behind this would be that, hey, state care, for example, if you're leaving the care system, every young person needs to have a funded housing solution before they leave, right? So you can't be exited out of care without actually being exited into housing and getting the support you need to manage that. The justice system is the same. Can't just be exited out of the justice system without support and care for that. And this would mean that these government organisations would need to start funding those programs and need to start planning for them. So those are a couple of the solutions. Another big one is actually, us as a community. I don't think this is just a government issue. These problems begin in our communities. Yeah. And a big question I have is, how do we as a community organise ourselves to support our own rangatahi? And sometimes it's about just asking the question. You might be aware that a young person's struggling, or your whānau next door is struggling, and something's going on, and just saying, look, how can we help you? Like, what's going on? How can we get you connected to supports? Another initiative I'm part of Massey Community Trust, which is a local trust in my hood, and we're kind of like trying to explore how do we organise ourselves to respond. And we're developing this project called the Safety Net Project, and it's about like unlocking sort of host homes, like spare rooms in our community. So like if you've got a young person that's their first experience of homelessness, rather than going into a hotel or staying somewhere unsafe tonight, they come to a whānau in the community and they get cared for. And I think those are things that are happening already, like naturally throughout like the country. Like it's just something that people do. But those are, I think, those questions around how do we organise so that that can happen a lot more efficiently, and that actually we can care for the young people that are within our community. Like I'm a big believer that the community has the power to hold and heal our own, right? We've got the solutions,
100%.
but sometimes we just need to think about how do we create the right mechanisms and structures around ourselves to empower each other to do that.
Yeah, the actions, right?
Yeah.
Action points. Wow. How do you feel, Tahu?
Heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, heavy.
Yeah.
A little bit lost. Like, just lost for words, lost for... Yeah, I can't find the words to express how sad the actual clip of it, like heartbreaking, eh? And especially today, like it's my people, you know? They're the biggest contingent of that stat line. And it's just another shit stat to our name.
Yeah.
I think one thing like maybe to centre on is our rangatahi, like they're not faceless victims in this, like our
They're
young
real
people,
people,
man, like they are some of the most courageous, loving, beautiful rangatahi that I've ever met. They give me so much courage, I've learned so much from the young people that I've served over this period. And one of the things I think I've learned the most is just that power of hope, and that power of like generosity and love and community. Like I remember this real beautiful moment in coming out of the 2020 lockdown, and I had about 3 or 4 young people come into my office and they told me like we'd slept rough over this period, and like, oh man, it was heartbreaking to hear. And like me and my team were like busy trying to find somewhere for them to stay tonight, and we knew that if we didn't, like they were going back on the street tonight. And I remember myself getting so anxious. In another room, hearing them just starting to sing and do waiata and just laugh, and that ability just to experience joy in the midst of such horrific injustice.
Absolutely.
I think that is something we can all learn.
Yeah.
And then also on top of that, like just the generosity that I learn from our rangatahi, right? Like so many times I see young people who have nothing that are willing to share like the $2 that they have with someone else if it means that they get to eat tonight, who will like rather stay on the sleep than leave the streets without their brother, like these are things that like I think we can all benefit from learning, and actually if we took those lessons, we'd be a different society.
We'd be a better society,
We'd be
right?
a much better society.
Yeah, I love that you talked about joy and hope, because that's really important, and that these stats are really painful to hear, but there are real experiences attached to those numbers and real faces, and it's really important that we always humanize that. But also that we don't like the sympathy aspect, where it's very like condescending. It's like, how can we do better and be better as a society? And I just think the way you worded that was really beautiful. And we're gonna wrap out right now, and I just a quick note to anyone who's listening, like please go after this and look after yourself, and take a breather. And it's important after hearing all that information to still like know that there's a lot of hope that we can do, and know that you potentially could do something yourself too. But give yourself a moment to breathe. But thank you so much for contributing to this conversation in such a beautiful, humanizing, compassionate way. And I think we need more of that when we're talking about topics that the media like to really demonize and villainize, and often attach to a very punitive approach to how we deal with it. So I just really appreciate the mahi that you do, and the kōrero that you brought to the table, and I feel like, to the chair, the very comfy chair. I feel like Tahu and I are going to have a lot to think about, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, my bro.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up, guys. Thank you so much for experiencing today with us. Take some time for yourself, and we're going to end it here. So, Pakite.
Aotearoa.